Shabbat Shalom, everyone. This week is Parashah 5, starting in Genesis 23, verse 1. Chayei-Sarah, Sarah's life. I'll give everyone a chance to get turned there. Sarah lived to be 127 years old. These were the years of Sarah's life. Sarah died in Kiryat Arba, also known as Hebron, in the land of Canaan, and Abraham came to mourn Sarah and weep for her. Then he got up from his dead one and said to the sons of Het, I am a foreigner living as an alien with you. Let me have a burial site with you so that I can bury my dead wife. The sons of Het answered Abraham, Listen to us, my lord. You are a prince of God among us. So choose any of our tombs to bury your dead. Not one of us would refuse you his tomb for burying your dead. Abraham got up, bowed before the people of the land, the sons of Het, and spoke with them. If it is your desire to help me bury my dead, then listen to me. Ask Ephron, the son of Zohar, to give me the cave of Machpelah, which he owns, the one at the end of his field. He should sell it to me in your presence at its full value. Then I will have a burial site of my own. Ephron the Hittite was sitting among the sons of Het, and he gave Abraham his answer in the presence of the sons of Het, who belonged to the ruling council of the city. No, my lord, listen to me. I'm giving you the field with its cave. I'm giving it to you. In the presence of my people, I give it to you. Abraham bowed before the people of the land and spoke to Ephron in their hearing. Please be good enough to listen to me. I will pay the price of the field. Accept it from me, and I will bury my dead there. But Ephron answered Abraham, My lord, listen to me. A plot of land worth 400 silver shekels. What is that between me and you? Just bury your dead. Abraham got the point of what Ephron had said, so he weighed out for Ephron the amount of money he had specified in the presence of the sons of Het, 400 silver shekels of the weight accepted among merchants. Thus the field of Ephron in Machpelah, which is by Mamre, the field, its caves, and all the trees in and around it were deeded to Abraham and as his possession in the presence of the sons of Het, who belonged to the ruling council of the city. Then Abraham buried Sarah his wife in the cave of the field of Machpelah by Mamre, also known as Hebron, in the land of Canaan. The field and its cave had been purchased by Abraham from the sons of Het as a burial site which would belong to him. By now Abraham was old, advanced in years, and Adonai had blessed Abraham in everything. Abraham said to the servant who had served him the longest, who was in charge of all he owned, Put your hand under my thigh, because I want you to swear by Adonai, God of heaven and God of earth, that you will not choose a wife for my son among the women of the Canaanite, among whom I am living, but that you will go to my homeland, to my kinsmen, to choose a wife for my son Yitzhak. The servant replied, Suppose the woman isn't willing to follow me to this land. Must I then bring your son back to the land from which you came? Abraham said to him, See to it that you don't bring my son back there. Adonai, the God of heaven, who took me away from my father's house and away from the land I was born in, who spoke to me and swore to me, I will give this land to your descendants. He will send his angel ahead of you, and you are to bring a wife for my son from there. But if the woman is unwilling to follow you, then you are released from your obligation under my oath. Just don't bring my son back there. The servant put his hand under the thigh of Abraham, his master, and swore to him concerning the matter. Then the servant took 10 of his master's camels and all kinds of gifts from his master, got up and went to Aram Naharaim, to Nahor's city. Toward the evening, when the women go out to draw water, he had the camels kneel down outside the city by the well. He said, Adonai, God of my master Abraham, please let me succeed today, and show grace to my master Abraham. Here I am, standing by the spring as the daughters of the townsfolk come out to draw water. I will say to one of the girls, 'Please lower your jug so that I can drink.' If she answers, 'Yes, drink, and I will water your camels as well,' then let her be the one you intend for your servant Yitzhak. This is how I will know that you have shown grace to my master." Before he had finished speaking, Rivkah, the daughter of Bethuel, son of Milcah, the wife of Nahor, Abraham's brother, came out with her jug on her shoulder. The girl was very beautiful, a virgin, never having had sexual relations with any man. She went down to the spring, filled her jug, and came up. The servant ran to meet her and said, "Please give me a sip of water from your jug to drink." "Drink, my lord," she replied, and immediately lowered her jug onto her arm and let him drink. When she was through letting him drink, she said, "I will also draw water for your camels until they have drunk their fill." She quickly emptied her jug into the trough, then ran again to the well to draw water, and kept on drawing water for all his camels. The man gazed at her in silence, waiting to find out whether Adonai had made his trip successful or not. When the camels were done drinking, the man took a gold nose ring weighing 1/5 of an ounce and 2 gold bracelets weighing 4 ounces, and asked, "Whose daughter are you? Tell me, please. Is there room in your father's house for us to spend the night?" She answered, "I am the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, born to Nahor," adding, "We have plenty of straw and fodder and room for staying overnight." The man bowed his head and prostrated himself before Adonai. Then he said, "Blessed be Adonai, God of my master Abraham, who has not abandoned his faithful love for my master, because Adonai has guided me to the house of my master's kinsman." The girl ran off and told her mother's household what had happened. Rivkah had a brother named Lavan. When he saw the nose ring and the bracelets on his sister's wrist besides, and when he heard his sister Rivkah's report of what the man had said to her, he ran out to the spring and found the man standing there by the camels. "Come on in," he said, "you whom Adonai has blessed. Why are you standing outside when I have made room in the house and prepared a place for the camels?" So the man went inside, and while the camels were being unloaded and provided straw and fodder, water was brought for him to wash his feet and the feet of the men with him. But when a meal was set before him, he said, "I won't eat until I say what I have to say." Lavan said, "Speak." He said, I am Abraham's servant. Adonai has greatly blessed my master, so that he has grown wealthy. He has given him flocks and herds, silver and gold, male and female slaves, camels and donkeys. Sarah, my master's wife, bore my master a son when she was old, and he has given him everything he has. My master made me swear, saying, "You are not to choose a wife for my son from among the women of the Canaanite, among whom I am living. Rather, you are to go to my father's house, to my kinsman, to choose a wife for my son." I said to my master, "Suppose the woman isn't willing to follow me?" Abraham answered me, "Adonai, in whose presence I live, will send his angel with you to make your trip successful, and you are to pick a wife for my son from my kinsman in my father's house. This will release you from your obligation under my oath. But if, when you come to my kinsman, they refuse to give her to you, this too will release you from my oath." So today I came to the spring and said, "Adonai, God of my master Abraham, if you are causing my trip to succeed in its purpose, then here I am, standing by the spring. I will say to one of the girls coming out to draw water, 'Let me have a sip of water from your jug.' If she answers, 'Yes, drink, and I will water your camels as well,' then let her be the woman you intend for my master's son." And even before I had finished speaking to my heart, there came Rivkah, going out with her jug on her shoulder. She went down to the spring and drew water. When I said to her, "Please let me have a drink," she immediately lowered her jug from her shoulder and said, "Drink, and I will water your camels as well." So I drank, and she had the camels drink too. I asked her, "Whose daughter are you?" And she answered, "The daughter of Bethuel, son of Nahor, whom Milcah bore to him." Then I put the ring on her nose and the bracelets on her wrist, bowed my head, prostrated myself before Adonai, and blessed Adonai, God of my master Abraham, for having led me in the right way to obtain my master's brother's daughter for his son. So now, if you people intend to show grace and truth to my master, tell me. But if not, tell me, so that I can turn elsewhere." Lavan and Bethuel replied, "Since this comes from Adonai, we can't say anything to you, either bad or good. Rivkah is here in front of you. Take her and go. Let her be your master's son's wife, as Adonai has said." When Abraham's servant heard what they said, he prostrated himself on the ground to Adonai. Then the servant brought out silver and gold jewelry, together with clothing, and gave them to Rivkah. He also gave valuable gifts to her brother and mother. He and his men then ate and drank and stayed the night. In the morning they got up, and he said, "Send me off to my master." Her brother and mother said, "Let the girl stay with us a few days, at least 10. After that, she will go." He answered them, "Don't delay me, since Adonai has made my trip successful, but let me go back to my master." They said, "We will call the girl and see what she says." They called Rivkah and asked her, "Will you go with this man?" And she replied, "I will." So they sent their sister Rivkah away with her nurse, Abraham's servant, and his men. They blessed Rivkah with these words, "Our sister, may you be the mother of millions, and may your descendants possess the cities of those who hate them." Then Rivkah and her maids mounted the camels and followed the man. So the servant took Rivkah and went on his way. Meanwhile, Yitzhak, one evening after coming along the road from Be'er Lachai Roi, he was living in the Negev, went out walking in the field. And as he looked up, he saw camels approaching. Rivkah too looked up, and when she saw Yitzhak, she quickly dismounted the camel. She said to the servant, "Who is this man walking in the field to meet us?" When the servant replied, "It's my master," she took her veil and covered herself. The servant told Yitzhak everything he had done. Then Yitzhak brought her into his mother Sarah's tent and took Rivkah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. Thus was Yitzhak comforted for the loss of his mother. Abraham took another wife, whose name was Keturah. She bore him Zimran, Yokshan, Medan, Midian, Yishbak, and Shuach. Yokshan fathered Shiva and Dedan. The sons of Dedan were Ashrim, Letushim, and Lumim. The sons of Midian were Ephah, Epher, Hanok, Avidah, Elda'ah. All these were descendants of Keturah. Abraham gave everything he owned to Yitzhak, but to the sons of the concubines he made grants while he was still living, and sent them off to the east, to the land of Kedem, away from Yitzhak, his son. This is how long Abraham lived, 175 years. Then Abraham breathed his last, dying at a ripe old age, an old man full of years, and he was gathered to his people. Yitzhak and Ishmael, his sons, buried him in the cave of Machpelah, in the field of Ephron, the son of Zohar, the Hittite by Mamre, the field which Abraham purchased from the sons of Het. Abraham was buried there with Sarah his wife. After Abraham died, God blessed Yitzhak his son, and Yitzhak lived near Be'er Lachai Roi. Here is the genealogy of Ishmael, Abraham's son, whom Hagar the Egyptian bore to Abraham. These are the names of the sons of Ishmael, listed in order of their birth. The firstborn of Ishmael was Naviot, followed by Kedar, Adbeel, Mivsam, Mishma, Dumah, Masa, Hadad, Tema, Yetur, Naphish, and Kedma. These are the sons of Ishmael, and these are their names according to their settlements and camps, 12 tribal rulers. This is how long Ishmael lived, 137 years. Then he breathed his last, died, and was gathered to his people. Ishmael's sons lived between Havilah and Shur, near Egypt, as you go toward Ashur, and he settled near all his kinsmen. Amen.
Well, as Nathan said, this week's Torah portion is entitled Chayei-Sarah, which means Sarah's life. Yet most of the Parashah spends its time recording the story of finding a suitable wife for Abraham and Sarah's son Isaac. So just as Genesis 22 was the climax of Abraham's life and of his divine purpose, so chapter 23, well, it pulls some loose ends together and transitions us from Abraham to Isaac. Now, it's crucial for our faith to understand that this transition goes far deeper than simply an issue of the transference of material wealth and family leadership, as that was common as the generations came and went. See, this transition from Abraham to Isaac brings with it the line of the covenant that God had made with Abraham concerning the creation of a special set-apart people for God, which would be given a special set-apart land for this new people group to live in. Even so, we're going to focus on two areas of this week's portion: the end of the life of Sarah and the end of the life of Abraham, that includes a listing of the descendants that Abraham spawned. Now, there's a reality about Sarah, reality that needs to be confronted right up front. And it is that Sarah is the matriarch, not only of the Hebrews and the Hebrew faith, but also the matriarch of the faith of all of us who follow Yeshua as Lord and Savior. Or to put it in terms that are more typical, Sarah is as much the matriarch of the Christian faith as she is of the Jewish faith. Now, I say this because the Constantinian church, especially as it manifests itself in Catholicism, has made Mary, mother of Jesus, to be the matriarch of the Christian faith. And while only Catholicism takes it so far as to deify Mary, even sending up prayers to her, all of Christianity lifts up Mary as the de facto Christian matriarch because she gave birth to Jesus by means of an immaculate conception. Now, like so much else about the Constantinian Church, which is the basis for Christianity as it has existed since the late 4th century to early 5th century, not only has Israel been wrongly replaced by the church, but also Israel's history has had elements of it replaced in order to arrive at a Gentiles-only Christian faith of today and of the past 1,600 years. So Sarah has been replaced by Mary, just as Jehovah has been replaced by Jesus. So the high place of Sarah, well, it needs to be restored to our faith institutions. For one thing, God made it clear that only through Sarah would he bring forth the seed that propels forward the covenant that he had made with her husband Abraham. Only Sarah. Every covenant made after that time, including the so-called new covenant that the church rests upon, well, it piggybacks upon the covenant of Abraham. And as critical is the so-called new covenant to the flow of redemption history, it is the covenant of Abraham that promises the seed of salvation and the blessing for all the families of the earth. So Sarah is the matriarch of the entire line of covenant promise right on through the advent of Yeshua. So we have to remember her. We need to honor her as such, to remember she was already married to Abraham when he received that call from God to leave his father, to leave much of his extended family, and go to another land, form another people. Sarah was with Abraham through everything. And she had great influence upon Abraham's decisions. She was the one who recognized that despite Ishmael being the first son to come from Abraham's loins, and as such was Abraham's favorite, Ishmael did not fulfill God's promise and requirements as the inheritor of the covenant promise. It was Sarah. It was Sarah who had the courage to demand that Ishmael rightly be sent away to separate him from that line of covenant promise that was to continue through her son Isaac. Now, as part of the reward for her faithfulness, she would live to the ripe old age of 127 years. Now, Hebrew tradition is that even after living that long, she could well have lived longer if not for the intense trauma she suffered over her only son Isaac's experience on Mount Moriah that destroyed her health. Now imagine, unable to have children, God miraculously gives you one in your old age. But now, ladies, your husband informs you God has asked for your child's life. All Sarah could do was sit. All she could do was grieve as the days went by, waiting for her husband to return from Mount Moriah, but without her only son. Abraham did not sacrifice Isaac, but the event took its toll. Hebrew tradition also informs us that Abraham was 138 years old when his beloved Sarah died. Now, from a scholarly viewpoint, Sarah's death is important because it provides some details of the first biblically recorded death and burial of a Hebrew. We find that Abraham and Sarah were living in Hebron when she expired. So it's natural Abraham would want to entomb her there. Now, it's key to remember that as of this point in time, God's promise of a land set aside for Abraham had not yet come to fruition. And at the time of Sarah's death, Abraham lived in a land that was not his own. He didn't actually possess any territory at all. He and Sarah lived much of their lives. Think about this. They lived much of their lives as nomads. And that's ironic that the only piece of real estate Abraham would ever be able to call his own was a field with a cave to use as a tomb for his beloved wife, and for later on for himself, and then eventually for his children and a grandchild, a particular grandchild, Jacob. Now, all three of the great Hebrew patriarchs of the Bible are buried in Hebron, now a territory foolishly given over to Israel's enemy, the Palestinians. Most of them identifying with Esau or Ishmael in an area called the West Bank. Now, I have been fortunate to visit that spot a few times. I've taken many others there with me. And I can tell you that in the past few years, only occasionally is Hebron peaceful enough for that adventure to even be contemplated. And even then, it's not without risk to go. But many Jews go, despite that risk. Now, I strongly suspect that David's choice of Hebron as the first capital city he would have when he became king of Judah had a lot to do with the awesome reverence associated with the burial place of the founding fathers of the people and the nation of Israel, including Sarah. So while the bargaining session now that we read about for that field, for that cave between Abraham and Ephron seems quaint, if not a little bit humorous, Ephron obviously being a leader among the people called Hittites who ruled over this area, by the way, ancient records reveal very good legal reasons that the deal that Abraham was pursuing for this cave of Machpelah as a tomb for he and his wife, the way that bargaining session went, the course that it took, it needed to be that way. See, the issue was this. In modern terms, Abraham and his clan were resident aliens living in Canaan. And it was typical in that day that foreigners could not purchase land. Land was everything. For a family of that day to lose its land by any means, well, that was a catastrophe. For a family to sell its land to a foreigner, well, that was an abomination. Yet it did occur. And it was legal if business was conducted properly. So, how the land was acquired was vital. For instance, had Abraham accepted it as a gift, not only would that have been shaming to the Hittites that he would accept such a thing, but likely it would have been challenged in the years to come by anyone claiming it was wrong of Ephron to give land to a foreigner. So Abraham could not accept Ephron's offer of the cave as a gift. And by the way, Ephron's offer to gift the land to Abraham was not at all sincere. It was just all part of the typical Middle Eastern kabuki dance that they all go through, bargaining. Everybody understood that. They know how it worked, which is why, of course, he did not accept the offer, because he understood it was just a traditional process that included a bit of gracious hospitality. Yet Abraham also had to be careful in his bargaining for it. Because if he bargained hard enough and he acquired it at a price that didn't seem fair to later generations, that was reason enough for the descendants of the selling family to take that land back, claiming that it was all an illegitimate transaction. Therefore, Abraham dickered around until Ephron finally set the price, 400 shekels of silver. Now, let me tell you something. That was a really high price. No local would have paid such a price. But by Abraham graciously insisting he's happy to pay full price, he took away the possible legal challenges that could have led to having that land as the place of burial for he and his family. He didn't want it taken away from him. Even so, the Palestinians now have claimed fraud. They say, no, it's our land. Needless to say, this is an ongoing, I think, likely never to be settled dispute. Now, burial spots were terribly important to the ancients, just as burial spots still bear enormous significance among our own modern societies. So this entire transaction occurred publicly before many of the town's citizens, Hittite citizens, so that they could be witness to the bargaining, the price setting, the final agreement, then the transfer of ownership of that field and cave from Ephron to Abraham. Okay, as we skip now to the last chapter of today's Parashah, chapter 25, we're going to jump over the picking of a wife for Isaac, who turned out to be Rivka of Mesopotamia, who was actually a family member. And we're going to jump right to the matter of the death of Isaac's father, Abraham. Now, there's a great deal of information just jam-packed into this chapter. And I suspect that prior to 1948, and the absolutely unthinkable fulfillment of the prophecy that Israel would someday be reborn as a nation of Jews, this listing of tribes coming from Abraham Well, it would have been relatively unimportant to Westerners, except for maybe librarians and historians. But now that Israel has returned to their homeland, and with the events of the Middle East that are shaking the whole earth like never before, these genealogical listings take on a little more important note, a little bit important role. See, this chapter documents the winding up of the story of Abraham and in later verses, Ishmael. We're given some final information about Abraham that we need to make some mental notation about. First of all, Abraham took another wife, a woman named Keturah, of whom we know next to nothing about. Bible scholars are not even totally clear whether or not Abraham was married to Sarah at the same time he was to Keturah. Now, Jewish tradition says Abraham married Keturah only after Sarah died. It's my opinion that we should not necessarily assume that the story of Abraham taking Keturah's wife was told in chronological sequence with the previous chapter of Genesis. That is, that Keturah only comes on the scene after Sarah. See, this literary device that the Torah employs by interrupting the sequence of events and then going back a few years and adding some new information about someone or something, that's not unusual. It's not at all unusual for either the Bible as a whole or for other writings from other cultures in that era and even eras well before and well after that. Who today hasn't seen movies and television series that's going along and says, now 6 weeks before, now 2 weeks after, oh, let's go back 2 weeks before, which drives me nuts, by the way. All right, but it does that. It jumps back and forth. Okay? Now imagine if it took out the part that said 6 weeks before. You'd be left to your own devices to figure it out. That happens a lot in the Bible. All right? And so sometimes it's very difficult to follow the chronology. One possibility concerning the timing of Keturah stands out above all the rest to me. These sons of Abraham born through Keturah could only have been born to Abraham before Isaac. This is because, as the Torah informs us, Abraham was far past human ability by that point for a male to sire a child, just as it was for Sarah to produce a child when Isaac was conceived. Therefore, unless these sons of Keturah were also miraculous conceptions, they had to come before Sarah bore the miracle baby Isaac. Now, of course, one could argue legitimately that upon God making Abraham capable of siring Isaac, Abraham regained his fertility for an extended period of time, maybe the rest of his life. Anyway, I just want you to see that it's pretty much impossible to nail down exactly when Abraham took Keturah as a wife and when these other children were born and whether these sons came before or after Isaac. Now we're told that Keturah gave Abraham several children. 6 of them are announced. And we have no idea, again, who Keturah is, who her ancestors were. And as is customary in the Bible, only the male children are mentioned, but it's unthinkable that Keturah didn't also give Abraham several daughters as well. However, it's clear that the etymology of Keturah's name is the Hebrew word keteret, which means spices or maybe incense. And in fact, certain tribes that have long been suspected as being descendants of Keturah and Abraham were associated with the spice and incense trade in ancient times. It's also helpful to know that the prime spice-producing region for the Middle East at that time, and for many centuries to come, was an area of southern Arabia that today we know as Yemen. This also shows just how extensive and regular trade and travel was among those ancient people. Now, we're going to run into several of these named children of Keturah later on in Scripture. And yet others will never be heard of again. So I want to point out one son in particular, because the territory he settled in was going to play a large role in Moses' life, and that son's name was Midian. And true to his mother's name, the Midianites were known as spice traders, particularly of the highly valued spice frankincense. Now, their territory was located on the Arabian Peninsula, bordered by the eastern edge of the Red Sea that today is called the Gulf of Aqaba. And these were the same Midianites from the same region where Moses fled from Egypt, where God came to Moses in a burning bush, also where Moses found his wife. In fact, it's my view, as an aside, that the Gulf of Aqaba is the biblical Red Sea that parted so that the Moses-led Israelites could flee to safety from the rapidly approaching army of Pharaoh. Now, these 6 sons of Keturah, along with the son Ishmael of Hagar, the Egyptian girl, they would go on to form what we can loosely call the Arab people that populated the Middle East and Northern Africa. But just be aware that the term Arab wasn't even created until sometime after the reign of King David. There was no such identifiable and named people group called Arabs or Arabians until probably at least 900 BC, or some 9 centuries after the time we're talking about. Now, we're told that Abraham gave all of his wealth and possessions to Isaac, which would have made Isaac a pretty wealthy, powerful man. But also, most certainly, it set the stage for enormous jealousy and strife between Isaac and his large extended family of half-brothers and sisters, and especially as concerns Ishmael. Because, biologically speaking, Ishmael was indeed Abraham's firstborn son, as far as we know. Now, that strife and jealousy continues to this very day. And with all those brothers and sisters expecting to receive some kind of inheritance and position, Abraham had to do something to assure that his son Isaac was decisively and without opposition elevated above all the rest, given a clear path to continue along the road of covenant promise that Jehovah had ordained. And so, yet again, we get a dramatic example of this ongoing God principle of dividing, electing, and separating. And this time, the objects of the division and separation were Isaac and Ishmael. Now, after we are told that Abraham gave most everything to Isaac, we're also told that Abraham gave gifts before he died to the sons of his concubines. Now, don't get confused here. Although most Bibles say Abraham took Keturah as a wife, and sometime earlier he took on Hagar as well, they were not technically actual wives, as was Sarah. They were concubines, kind of a different class of wife from the standpoint of the long entrenched Middle Eastern traditions and customs. Okay, these concubines were well treated, they were respected, all right? They enjoyed the status of being joined to Abraham's clan, but they did not have the exalted place as a true legal wife like Sarah. And their children usually would have had lesser rights of inheritance than the sons of the true legal wife. In fact, the law of that era was that it was entirely up to the father to choose which, if any, of his children from concubines to give them some inheritance. So while Isaac got all of the inheritance and family authority, the other sons of Abraham by means of his concubines, they got some gifts, likely fairly substantial gifts, because Abraham was very wealthy. So now, were there other concubines than Keturah and Hagar? Possibly. Abraham then sent these sons of his concubines away to other territories, electing and dividing. That naturally leads to separating. And then this electing and dividing can be very painful. These were not heartless people. Listen to what Yeshua told his would-be followers, and still applies now, concerning this exact thing. From Luke 14, starting at verse 26. If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and his mother and his wife and his children, his brothers and sisters, and yes, his own life, he can't be my disciple. Whoever does not carry his own execution stake and come after me cannot be my disciple. That's pretty harsh stuff. Well, Abraham dies at the ripe old age of 175 years, and it is most interesting, I think, to note that all during Abraham's lifetime, Shem, that's Shem, son of Noah, he was still alive. And in fact, Shem outlived Abraham. Oh man, what a life Abraham lived. That each of us could have such a close and intertwined life with Jehovah, that his purpose would be so powerfully played out through us. We must always realize that the primary thing that Abraham did was simply to say yes. Yes to whatever God asked him to do. Yes to whatever God asked him not to do. Then God did the rest. We are told that he was gathered to his people. This is a term that's very different from dying or being buried in the ground or went down to Sheol. Rather, it implies a sort of reunion with those who were considered righteous in God's eyes, who had come before him. And it also speaks to a belief that death is not the end. A concept that will from here forward be built upon only slightly in the Old Testament scriptures, but it's going to take on a far greater meaning with the advent of Christ in the New Testament. Well, we're informed the estranged half-brothers, Ishmael and Isaac, came together to bury their father. And as would have been customary, when possible, the husband was buried with his wife. Abraham was buried in the same tomb as Sarah, the cave of Machpelah in Hebron. And later, Isaac and Rebekah would join them in that same location, as eventually would Jacob. God makes it clear to any who might doubt where the line of covenant he had made with Abraham led. Because we read, God blessed Isaac. The handing of the torch from Abraham to Isaac by the end of this Torah portion is now complete. But that torch will in time be passed on again. Would you bow your heads in prayer, please?
For more teaching and information, visit us online today. Come and be a part of our fellowship. Here at The Seed, enjoy worshiping and learning God's Word with us.